versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Movie versus Movie. It's Nick and your probably favorite host.
What? What is this about? It's Patrick.
I'm in a place in my life where I just want to build my friends up. You know what I mean?
Okay, fair. I don't want you tearing yourself down.
No, I would never.
Right.
Because that's not what I learned from the two movies that we have today is all you need is unbridled confidence. You know what I mean?
True.
Just, I'm just going to do it.
Some marketing buzzwords and unbridled confidence.
Absolutely. And what do they say in network? The clicks or something? They're like, that's a 10 and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Share.
Share. That was it. Yeah. I mean, for everyone who didn't remember from last episode, we are doing Network versus Nightcrawler. Both of us just back to back, double featured these movies. And we both had some pretty crazy reactions to them. So why don't we start with Network? We talked about it being the one that makes sense to start with. And I want to start just by talking about genre, because this is a satire. When it came out, it was released as a satire. The movie is very funny. It's very absurd and surreal in some ways. However, I was like, this is like the most tragic tragedy. And it was because I feel like the impossibility of it since the 70s has drastically changed. And now it just feels like a really sad version of what's happening. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a satire, but it's also like pitched. The tone of it is like pretty serious. It takes, it's not, what am I trying to say? It's not like wearing the satire too heavily on its sleeve. It takes itself seriously. It's not like a farce in that sense.
It also kind of had, I had a little bit of a hard time tracking who was our protagonist, who was our lead character. Did you also have that?
A little bit. And I wanted to talk about it because I did a little bit of reading. I'm not, far from an expert, but I did some reading on the screenwriter and the production and was kind of surprised by some of just from Wikipedia articles, so nothing too in depth, but because the screenwriter is Paddy Chayefsky, who's a Russian or American, but Russian Jewish origin playwright and screenwriter. And reading about him developing the story, I was kind of surprised at how much he was mapping his own feelings and himself onto Howard Beale of all the characters, because I was like, this man's clearly had a psychotic break with reality.
And we'll get to it, but when he at near the third of the last, excuse me, let me say that again. He in the last third of the movie, when he's doing his sort of rants in his studio and he's well produced, wearing that suit and everything, he always ends those rants by collapsing. And I was this man just had a stroke. He's dead. He is literally had an aneurysm on stage. And I as a watcher could not distinguish between it actually being real and it being for the effect of the television, which again is genius, because I think that's exactly what the screenwriter was trying to do, right? Is make us have that weird dissonance of what is real, what is for TV. It doesn't matter if that is what's being presented to us as news. It's it kind of broke my brain a little bit by the end.
Yeah, kind of that line between, this movie came out in 1976, so almost 50 years old. And the level of prescience it has about reality TV essentially is pretty insane. Because I think that's what it gets into a lot, is this, what is this line between reality and performance? And again, does it matter if it's being capitalized for profit and, getting people to tune in and watch it. Do we really care? At what point do the powers that be care enough to, make a change or put an end to it, which is kind of, the direction that the movie goes. But yeah, I think too, just reading, I think kind of finding out that the screenwriter maps himself onto Howard Beale as much as he does was kind of illuminating in a sense, because watching a movie, you're kind of trying to map, like you said, where's the actual point of view lie in this, and it's not totally clear. And there's obviously a extremely political movie, I think is pretty explicitly so. But then you're also I was curious, especially of the time too. I felt like there was more of a robust left wing political environment, and so I'm curious, who kind of pre Red Scare McCarthyism, who was a part of that. And this movie kind of has that all over its sleeve. So I was reading about Paddy Chayefsky, and he was opposed to McCarthyism and, ended up on some of those lists, but he was also pretty anti-Marxist, which is interesting where this movie's coming from. And I think, not to get too deep into the personal politics of the person who wrote it, but I think a lot of it was tied to his identity as a Jew, and he was a Zionist, and I think that was kind of where a lot of his tensions came from.
Yeah, there's some weird racist stuff in here, right? And there's also the oh god, he rants against the Arabs specifically, but the oil creating states, and that's a huge part of it. So him being a Zionist, that tracks 100%, because I was because for me, I had to keep reminding myself that it wasn't early 2000s when this was made, because I was oh, is this some sort of post 9/11 Muslim hatred coming from the terrorist attacks or something, because it's really blatant. And then it's not, but it's also kind of from the same era of the crazy inflation, a stagflation recession, and also all of the oil prices. That's when all of the oil prices were going crazy at the pump. So I guess it makes sense. But yeah, the Zionist underpinnings there were sort of oh.
Yeah. And that's another point though, where you're okay, is this supposed to be kind of the rantings of a madman that just happened to pinpoint this one thing that gets the corporate heavies upset? And again, reading it was no, he was Paddy Chayefsky, the screenwriter, was that was what he was mad about. And he's I'm going to put, these are basically rants that I was having, and I'm going to write them in the voice of Howard Beale. I mean, it's maybe there's some self-awareness that he's this character's having a mental break, but he's tapping into stuff. But
it also makes sense that he's an anti-Marxist sort of guy, because the way that they portray the leftists, the communists in this movie, because they have that one African American woman who gets her own show and is sort of essentially partnering with a terrorist group, which is sort of a maybe a Black Panther equivalent. It's sort of again, it is sort of an Arab group, because the main guy, it's all very vague, which I think is part of his sort of just across the board fear of the anything that is considered socialist or communist, because it's all just they just are selling out. They don't care. They're also in it for money. They're partnering with terrorists, even though they're robbing banks and stuff. Everyone's in it for the same reason, which is just audience share. Which I think is sort of great satire, but it now that I know that he's a Zionist, it sort of does feel again sort of a weird pushing of a political it feels more earnest, because satire most of the time feels it's not earnest. It's making fun of these things. But now hearing that, I'm oh, that's a little too earnest for my liking.
A little bit, yeah. But I think there's still a level of thoughtfulness and nuance that you don't get generally in anything today. And maybe this movie is also kind of I think getting at that as it progresses, and what the appeal of Howard Beale is supposed to be. Because I read it's like the Ecumenical Liberation Army, I think, is the like terrorist group, and they reference the like Symbionese Liberation Army, who are it's like a militant far left group who kidnapped Patty Hearst, who is like a wealthy heiress. They reference them, so I kind of thought that they were more mapped onto that. And then you have the communist leaders kind of framed as like more like I would assume like a Black Panther, like Angela Davis type, is more principled and is like
very much is Angela Davis. It is a 1-for-1 like slap on, be like, this is who I am. This is a stand-in for this person.
But like initially she's very principled. She's like that group, they're a distraction. They're far too aggressive. They're actually a detriment to the movement. They're kind of just doing it for attention. But then as the movie goes on, I do think it's the cynicism about how it feels about those people comes more, because then you get these scenes where she's negotiating television contracts with like the same intensity that you would see someone giving like a political stump speech about, which I think is kind of almost one of the more, it seemed like, directly comedic like elements of the movie. But I don't know.
When they're in the house with the great Ahmed, and who's the leader of the terrorist group, and this Angela Davis sort of like stand-in, they're all in there with the film executives, and they're in this like the like terrorist group's sort of hideout in this like farmhouse. And they're all arguing about like, this guy's ruining my audience hates him, blah, blah, blah. I'm not giving him anything. And then he just fires a gun into the sky. And then he's just like, so are we on page 22? They all start like changing the contract. I was like, wow, that's really, really funny.
That was probably the biggest laugh, like out loud laugh that I got, mainly because the one guy too falls over when he shoots the gun.
And he's like, nobody will ever believe me when I tell them about this. But it's also like going back to the protagonist thing, like because when it opens, it has like a narrator, which was, I think, a little like, it kind of took me aback, because narrators in movies I always find a little bit lazy. However, you kind of needed it in this one, because you do make so many transitions between point of view characters. So you start with Howard Beale. It is quickly then taken, and then like the first third of the movie is kind of Howard and his descent into being very mentally unwell, and the people around him, like how is this happening? And then the middle third is about Max, his boss and longtime friend, who essentially is cheating on his wife with this producer, like a programming executive, who is sort of trying to push them into a more extremist sort of sensationalist news program. And then the last third of the movie kind of goes to like the executive that like the programming woman, but also the executive that is like working in the company and who has ousted all of the old guard to like make as much of a profit as possible. And like it really like does move through these characters without holding your hand, to the point where I was like, is this a movie? Is this a TV show? Like it felt like the format itself wasn't like a classic structure, which I thought was really cool to watch. And it was like a very interesting ride, because it feels like you're going over a period of time really effectively. But it was also, a little hard to track sometimes, like where like who should I be touching the ground with, because all these characters are so insane and they're all over the place, and we're like with each of them very briefly and then we move on, kind of thing. What did you find anything like that?
I think so, yeah. And I think, we can start like getting into the plot with this, because the trajectory I think that you expected to follow, and even the little bit that I knew about this movie from the big I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, some of these speeches, and what I expected and like thought it would follow, it does like subvert those expectations. It's always hard to know too. I'm like, is this just the pacing of movies from the 70s, and like we're just used to a modern structure, 3-act structure and style, right? Although, is this doing something more unconventional? Which I do think it is doing something more unconventional, because throughout Max and Diana's relationship, they're constantly discussing how it's being scripted as a story, and he's pointing out these like typical plot structures and like second act betrayal, and how it could have a happy ending. So I do think it is aware of like those structures, and yeah, it must intentionally be messing with them to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't we dive into it and then we can kind of stop down when we have something specific to say, because there's so much. Also, just at the top, both of these movies feel like the exact same movie, except like from two different directors. It's like almost that they were like a film festival was saying, here is the theme that everyone has to write a script and do a movie on. And then you had like the entry from the 70s and the entry from the 2015 era. And they are basically the same, like beat for beat throughout. You're just feeling like, oh, these are the same themes. We're still talking about the same subject. This is like, even in certain ways, it's like same characters. You know what I mean? It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted like, yes, very. I mean, I think to the point where Nightcrawler has to be, in a sense, directly inspired by Network, which we'll get to. But I think
it's definitely in conversation at the very least.
Yeah, I think I do want to talk about like, with that in mind, like which movie is maybe more like prescient and relevant still, because I don't, some stuff in Network I was like, man, he's really hitting the nail on the head, and then some stuff in Nightcrawler I'm like, this might already 10 years out, some of this stuff might already be kind of irrelevant and out of date.
It is a little bit, I would say Network is more timeless because they are talking about a medium that still exists with us today, and something that is like can be mapped onto other formats. Like there's television, but like it's really talking about filmed content. Like how do we keep up with our news, and like what actually plays in a film sense. And like you can still see the same rules that they're talking about in Network be applied to like TikToks and stuff like that. Like it all still works. Whereas with Nightcrawler, I think certain things work way better, like the addressing of the gig economy and sort of capitalism, which is touched upon in Network as well, but it's more about ideals and like political stuff with Network. And with Nightcrawler, it's much more like on an individual's feel of that during a really specific time. And like you said, even this far out, like the entire game would have changed. Like all of the technology used is completely useless. Like the way that works is like not sort of the way things work anymore. There aren't these big news stations, and like that the local crime is what leads in the morning. Like that doesn't really happen anymore as much as it used to, because that's just like a dead format. So like you said, I think that Network feels a little bit more timeless, whereas Nightcrawler feels very specific, and we can talk about how that hit with us. But anyway.
No, I think that's a great way to put it, because I think I had similar feelings of like, Network captures. I mean, I think we'll talk about like scale of it too, because I think that's something that maybe is different in Nightcrawler, and maybe it doesn't work as well for me because of that. But I had something I wanted to say, but I'll just jump into the plot, and I'm sure it'll come back. I think I was just going to say broadly. Well, one, these movies are specifically about television, which I think is interesting coming from
for sure.
Filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And I think Nightcrawler has more of that idea of the filmmaker and like kind of an auteur vision of its protagonist. And I think there's more parallels there but I do also feel like there is a sense of like, well, television is seedy and gross and disgusting, but like we're making film and we can like say something about that.
Yeah. It also felt a little bit, and let me see if this hits with you as well, but like that television is much more driven, like he is in Nightcrawler doing the artistry of the shots and like framing everything, but it's all to make it more profitable, if that makes sense. Like it's all about profit margin in both of these movies. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I've inadvertently watched a handful of movies. I said I watched Broadcast News right before this, which is also in a lot of ways about television news and the direction that's heading at the time, which was like late 80s, early 90s. And then I watched a couple other movies. I think I talked about Brian De Palma movies those ones are, I think, more specifically about film, but like critique of the filmmaker and the desire for sensationalism and like what that means, to the point of like in one of the movies, Blowout, he the guy's like a sound designer for movies, and he uses like the actual sound of a woman being killed in a movie. And they're like, wow, this is an incredible performance. Anyways, but just there's a lot of, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of that stuff just floating around in my head, kind of inadvertently with what I've been watching. But okay, we'll jump into the plot for real.
Maybe. Well, let's see how long that lasts.
Okay, like you said, it opens with narration, and we're seeing like television screens. And I had forgotten that the narration introduces the character of Howard Beale. He's a network anchor on this fictional news station, UBS. His ratings started to fall, and then his wife died, which I forgot.
Yeah.
And so he began to drink heavily, and then was notified that he was fired after that. So it's just kind of like precipitating his mental state.
He wasn't fired because of the drinking or anything. He was being fired because his ratings were going down. Like he used to pull a specific number and then it started to reduce. Again, I only correct you in that, not because I thought that you were wrong in your plot summary, but more because this movie constantly reminds you that the center of gravity around responsibility and consequence is only whether your ratings are good or not. Yes. You know what I mean? It's like, Absolutely. It's crazy. And this is the first little taste of it we get.
Even, to the point of the final narration explicitly calling that out as just in case you forgot. Yeah. But so he goes out drinking with his boss and producer, Max Schumacher. And it starts jokingly there. He's like, what if I go on TV and shoot myself? Well, that would really boost the ratings, right?
Yeah.
And
his boss is sort of like, ha ha ha, don't say that. Like, come on, you're fine. Like, we're all in this. We're all old guard, like that kind of thing. But yeah, he's like, I'm just gonna fucking kill myself on TV next week. It was kind of a crazy way to open the movie, honestly.
Yeah, and it's like he goes on and says that, and I like how they're showing the control room with the producers, and none of them, they're all just like kind of
not even paying
out
attention.
Of it. None of them notice it. They're like, okay, and we're gonna cut to like this segment, and someone comes in and is like, did anyone just hear that? Like what he said?
Like, did you just notice that he said he was going to kill himself on TV? And they're all like, what are you talking about?
But yeah, so then we're introduced. I feel like the movie generally follows 4 main characters. It's Max, Howard, and then Frank, who's the executive senior VP of the network, who's Robert Duvall. He's kind of the ruthless, like he's not the top of the pile, but he's obviously,
but boy does he want to be.
Yes, he's angling to get there. This kind of savvy, ruthless, just capitalist executive. And so they fire him, obviously, and there's this movie. This movie is this collection of like meetings and monologues, essentially.
Can I say this movie has like the 3 best monologues in film?
It's incredible. I was like, I'm such a sucker for just like a good monologue where you're like, is this how people actually talk? No, but like when somebody's just like grabs the mic and is like, I'm going to tell you what my deal is. I'm like, hell yeah.
Can I also say my favorite part is in this movie is a monologue, and it is when like Furnace or whatever his name is, Jornath, I don't know. He's like
Jensen.
Jensen, that's what it is. When Jornathan. But when he is like, I can sell someone like anything to anyone, and I think I know how to sell you on something. He's talking to Howard Beale. They go into a room and he just like monologues how like God is dead. There's no such thing as democracy anymore. The only thing that matters is the monetary sort of value of stuff. And he like puts the fear. It's like kind of like a sermon, like fear of God kind of thing. And he puts it into like Howard Beale's head, and like it is the most amazing scene. What a great performance by that actor. It's basically the only thing he does in the movie other than one other scene where he just says, good, keep doing what you're doing or whatever. But it's an incredible performance. And it's like such an interesting part of the movie because he says like stuff in a specific way that mirrors when Howard has his sort of first dream that like causes him to kind of crack up and come in to do this crazy monologue.
Yes.
He like does the same sort of like, he does the same answers, like call and response as this other guy does when he's selling him on this new ideology. And I was like, this is fucking brilliant. This is so cool.
I was like levitating off my couch during that scene because
your light shining out of your eyes as you like start floating.
But that was the scene where I'm like, this is the movie. Like, this is what this is what he's trying to say. Like, but I was also like, they fucking knew this 50 years ago. We're still living in this same world.
We're still in the same shit.
But then that's the part that kind of baffled me is like hearing that and then kind of reading more about the screenwriter and you're like, huh, I mean, he recognizes this stuff and I don't want to like dwell on this too much, but it did just fascinate me. And I think, he positioned himself as like a social democrat. So he's,
absolutely.
He understands this kind of thing, but like
but
to also...
he identifies the left's problems with the sort of corporatocracy that we all sort of live in today. And then he like shows the left as being just the same as that, like, part of that sort of money grubbing, attention seeking group. And I was sort of like, yes, but no. Like this, I agree with you, but I don't know if I agree about this.
Right. Yeah. So after he has his initial outburst, I think kind of importantly, when Frank shows up to berate Max about this, and Max is kind of trying to be like, look, this is how we'll handle it. We'll have him apologize on air. Frank's basically like, fuck you. The news division loses money. Like, I hate you, basically. I don't respect you. And I feel like that kind of turns Max a little bit. And he kind of starts to just, I don't know, be more like, why not? Who fucking cares? Like, I'm not respected here. I can see that my time here is also probably short. And so like, as things go on, he's willing to kind of let Howard have a longer leash to kind of do his thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he vehemently, I guess like the one part of the movie that I get a little stuck on was because one of the reasons why he lets Howard just kind of go is because he gets kind of fucked over at a meeting of executives and shareholders for the company, and they are going to restructure management. And then he's like basically left out of that conversation, even though he has been promised news autonomy within the organization, even if they aren't profitable. And it's wild to me because like the movie kind of keeps doing this thing where one of the executives that basically threw him under the bus is also like, listen, I always was behind you. And tomorrow morning at our meeting, which I refused to tell you what it was about, it was going to be me telling you that I backed you, but you fucked that up. So I want your resignation. Yeah. And I was like, this is so contrived. Like, why wouldn't the executive have said like, hey, chill out. Don't worry about this. I'm going to explain how we're going to get through this in the meeting. But just because he's such like an asshole about it, it causes all of the mess to follow. And I was like, what the fuck is this supposed to mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a lot of just kind of like trivial corporate politicking that doesn't right. It's a little bit of just like misunderstanding.
Like comedy of errors. Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
But so kind of the next scene, we get introduced to Diana Christensen, who's Faye Dunaway's character, who is this younger, I think she was in like her mid-30s at the time. I looked it up because I was like, how creepy is this relationship?
Yeah.
She was like in her, she was in her like mid-30s, which I assume the character is supposed to be too, because she's also this kind of like enterprising programming exec who's kind of just willing to do whatever. And I think it's interesting too, because there's like, as we get into this stuff, there is this kind of like almost apolitical nature of the kind of executive class in this movie, where no one ever really expresses an ideology one way or another. Like you said at the beginning, it's all about ratings. Like,
yeah,
they don't really, I mean, there's a little bit, but they don't really like pass judgment strongly on, you know, these groups that they're like bringing in to produce their programs. They're like, great, if it'll bring in viewers, sweet. But this is kind of where you get the initial thing, you know, this, I'm not sure, this guy comes in, I think he's also a producer, like a freelance guy.
Yeah.
But he's got footage of the Revolutionary, and then footage from the Revolutionary. Her name's Laureen Hobbs. She's like the leader of the Communist Party. And then there's also this Ecumenical Liberation Army who robbed a bank and filmed it. And that's the one that's led by this figure, Ahmed Khan, I think his name. But
yeah, the Great Ahmed or something.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. So they have this idea to produce essentially a reality show. They're going to give these people a weekly show where they just go film their exploits. And
not even a reality show, because literally she is asking them to commit terrorist acts weekly.
Yeah.
And to send them the footage that they take themselves. And she's like, obviously, this company can never be associated with you guys. So if it has to all be through this other person who we employ, but not really. It's like a contractor. It's like so devious the whole way through. And they're all like kind of being like, yeah, that makes it okay.
Yeah. And it's all just presented as a business arrangement. And they're like, no, of course we'll have to do it like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, they create this show called the Mao Zedong Hour. And it's interesting because that's kind of like going on in the background. We see the negotiations and stuff. We don't ever actually see any of that broadcast or even anyone else that's on, because then they also start to just bring in these other kind of countercultural, like
not even countercultural. It's almost like circus performers in a way.
Yeah, or kind of like mysticism, new age type, like fortune tellers.
Like there's a literal fortune teller that they bring in to like do her stock picks and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah. And so, but you really, the only programming we actually see is Howard Beale. We never actually see any of this other programming, which I was like, I kind of want to see, but I don't know. Maybe it was,
all we are told is that they are all sort of successful on their own as well, though Howard is by far the ratings leader.
Right. And so
it's kind of, you know what it reminded me of, like super intensely? It reminded me of like the Fox News lineup, like that 7 to 10 or 11 p.m. block. That's all the, you know, like Hannity and Tucker Carlson and like the Fox News update or whatever. Like there's like a small news segment in there, but all of the rest of it is personality driven. And I was like, holy hell, this guy figured out what was going to happen 60 years in the future.
Yeah, I had the same feeling of just the like 24-hour news network, and the need to fill time with commentators that aren't news, aren't even explicit like that. I mean, they're ideologically driven, but they're not actually like saying much. And
and they're business people. They're all kind of entrepreneurs, which I also think is a common theme between the two.
I mean, I think like Howard Beale too gets into like Alex Jones type territory in a sense. And he's kind of he was like a local radio guy in Austin that, you know, I think just had a show where he ranted and then, you know, kind of got plucked, or I don't know if anyways, it's got shades of all this stuff.
But to be fair, I do want to say that like the film is very much pro Howard the person and places him up there as like, this person has had a mental break, like is very unwell. He's muttering to himself. He walks in the rain for like hours to go from like the house that he's staying at because he had to hide from reporters and stuff. He like walks in, he's still drenched in the rain with his, you know, pajamas on and starts ranting at the camera. Like the movie is saying the actual bad people are not this person who is unwell. It is everyone who is enabling him around him. You know what I mean? Yeah,
absolutely. You get he walks into the building, clearly unwell, that no one's seen him for like an entire day, and they just immediately point the cameras at him and put him on air. And right, you get the recurring thing of him fainting at the end of his speeches, and the camera just zooms in and the crowd like goes nuts. I do think it is. It is explicit in that he is having some kind of mental break. And no one is doing anything to help him, and it accelerates as the movie goes on.
It's really hard to watch. Like I said, like one of the things I think that the screenwriter was trying to do is they are showing that the physical pain of a person, like the actual physical state of someone being in a desperate situation, is like vastly entertaining to the rest of the world, I guess, the culture that is eating up this stuff. Like they see something of themselves in him, because I guess it's like, it is a stagflation period. Everyone's feeling like that there is no future for them. There's the thing where they're all screaming out their windows while he's screaming. So I think it's like that resonance of pain. They kind of taught, like what the programmer, whatever her name is, was saying, like, yeah, people want someone to express the anger and the bullshit that they're feeling. But then it's sort of like how that has kind of commodified physical pain. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like it's throughout the entire thing. Like you see people get, be in very dangerous situation with guns and all of the kind of terrorist groups videos. You see, Howard Beale being in a really bad situation. You also see, and there's also like this kind of weird thing of like the old guard being kind of like an unfeeling, logical, like we report the news in their interactions with folks. And then all the new guard is like, no, we just want emotionality. We want pain. We want suffering. That's what people want. And like, it does feel like that is how the last 60 years have gone with how we consume stuff. It's all, it's all emotion. It's whatever strikes people's fancy. It's not like there's a couple things throughout the movie where they talk about what is actually happening in the world. And it's like multiple civil wars, like bombings, economic recessions, people suffering, and they never report on any of it. You know what I mean? It's like they never talk about any of those things.
Anytime you hear actual news, it's usually in the background, and it is usually extremely dramatic. It's multiple assassination attempts on the president, and I think too there's this like I like as his rants become accelerate and stuff, I think they kind of like, except for some of the specifics about the like Saudis purchasing stuff, they kind of like become divorced. It is all just about anger and like expressing rage, and he even explicitly says like, I don't want you to like protest or revolt, like I just want you to get angry and yell about it. And
which is such a great satirization of the actual way that people are these days. It's like I'm going to show people I'm angry by putting a black box on my Facebook profile picture instead of like actually doing anything.
Right. And I think that's like where I like as I watched it, I thought, well, some of the cynicism of the movie as it relates to like actual politics and like the revolutionary and the left figures that they're portraying. I was like, well, it's cynical about how these movements and these ideas are commodified and flattened for an audience and used to like, to quell the actual discontent and organizing that's happening. But I think as the movie went on, as I thought about it more, I was like, well, I think it's also cynical about this actual ideology and the people that are organizing these groups, because it also shows them as just immediately being willing participants. Like I think initially I understood like, oh, there's the allure of having your own opportunity to produce propaganda on a mass scale. And maybe you can take advantage of that, but I do think it does, as we talked about, kind of treats the Laureen character pretty poorly by the end and pretty cynically.
Well, so this is something I want to ask you about that relationship, because it felt very much to me sort of like an Ahab white whale sort of thing, where they weren't people, they were ideas. And it was like, it's very much Max is a like a sailor being like, I'm in love with the sea. You know what I mean? Like she is TV. She is the media. She is what like the business that he has been in love with for so long. But she has like become so unfeeling. And they even have that conversation where he's like, I just want you to love me. And she's like, I don't know how to do that. It's like, you know what I mean? It's really interesting. I really like it. Like it was heavy handed, but it kind of worked for me. Did it work for you?
No, same. Yeah. Cause by the end he's like, you are like television incarnate. Like, that is what you are. And the whole, I mean, they're like the one actual like sex scene that they have she's just describing TV that she's going to program like throughout the build up to this. But yeah, I know. I think this movie, like, again, I think it's a pretty cynical movie, but I think it's pointed enough and still, I don't know. I think to me, there's still enough like humanity in it that it works. It still works for me.
Yeah.
And I think you get enough out of the big speeches that we were talking about that it's like, but yeah, so in terms of like plot, I think we get to the meeting you talked about where Max kind of gets screwed over. And then ultimately he's asked to resign. But at the same time, Howard, he's gone on this second rant where he's yelling about all the bullshit in the world and is kind of giving more of an explanation for his initial outburst. And then, this is where his popularity starts to tick up because he's tapping into something.
Because they even talk about it. They're like, people don't just want someone to be sad on air. They want someone to be like more angry and prophetizing. You know what I mean? Like trying to like give the voice to the masses. Yeah.
And she, as with the news thing, she has this moment where she lists off everything that's going on in the world. And she's like, but the front page is Howard Beale. And like, this is what people are interested in.
Yeah, there was also a really great line that I was like, wow, what a great like thing to drop into your satire. But there's the line where someone's like, the New York Times is destroying us. And they're like, well, you guess what? The New York Times doesn't advertise with us. And I was like, damn, dude, what a takedown of how this whole thing works. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But so, eventually, Diana gets this idea that she wants to program Howard Beale as regular television programming, basically outside the news division. And so this kind of precipitates him getting his own The Howard Beale Show, where he has this, kind of elaborate set and intro and host that introduces him, and he comes out and he does these rants that are like, mostly incoherent. I guess before the rant, he does his "I'm mad as hell" speech, right? Because he's kind of having this mental break a couple different times. He stays with his friend Max, and then the one he leaves in the night, walks around in the rain, and then comes back and does his "mad as hell" speech.
Which I think again is like clever wordplay, right? Like he is literally at his most unstable in that scene, and the words he uses that "I'm mad as hell," like I'm, could be construed as like I'm crazy as hell kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
It is. It's like, man, this movie rocks. It's very, very well written. But yeah, keep going.
So I guess I'm trying to remember the exact, I guess there's kind of two plots happening at the same time. Like you said, it shifts focus. So we get Howard Beale is increasingly having these breakdowns, and they're realizing that they have a hit on their hands. And so they're going to give him his own show. And at the same time, Max ends up keeping his job. And initially Diane approaches him about this idea to program Howard. And he's actually like, no, like I can't get behind that, but can I get behind you? And, and then
which is gross because there's a whole part of it where he's like, didn't I give a speech at your college? And she was like, I was in the audience. And it's like, blah.
Yeah, it's rough. It was just like, I like, what's his name? William Golden, the actor too. I was like, because he's in or no, William Holden, sorry, he's in like Sunset Boulevard and a bunch of old like Billy Wilder movies, and I was just like, man, this guy's old as hell.
Yeah.
But I you know, I was kind of like, this is kind of gross. Like, you get his wife as a character, and I was like, God, this poor woman, like they're going to give her nothing to do. But then she gets her own monologue, which I thought was also incredible, where she's, basically like, how dare you walk out on me after 25 years of marriage, and this isn't even just some like fling with your secretary, like you're in love with this woman, like where does that leave me? And so I was like, well, at least they gave her that to
it's such an interesting scene because she is like going through quite an emotional moment. But there's also kind of this, like you said earlier, there's this thing of, but here's the storyline. And she's like, yep, that's the storyline. Like, you're in for some rough times ahead. It's very prophetic. Like, that's a theme throughout the entire movie, is like prophecy and mysticism. But like Max literally says what's going to probably happen. One of the scripts has me coming back to you after it doesn't work out with her. And like another script is like this and this. And she kind of looks at him and is like, well, that sounds like it's going to be really tough and suck for you.
Yeah. He's just like, I don't know. I don't have anything to say. Yeah. There is like an element occasionally in these speeches where they like are kind of removed from the actual situation. And they're like, well, when they're kind of like commenting on this like structure of it. The plots, I was like, Wikipedia too broad. This other website I found, extremely detailed. I'm trying to get the broad beats of it. But yeah, they let's see. I feel like we've skipped around a little bit, but like,
yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I think like the important beats, because the mad as hell speech comes out like halfway through, and that's when he's still just a regular news anchor. He does the speech where he tells everyone to go to their window and yell, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And then people start doing it. This is when Max is left. And then basically he comes back in and they're like, oh no, actually, like, Howard's a hit and we want to produce this show and we still want you to work there. Mm-hmm. It's funny too, because the narration like randomly comes back in and I'm like, is this just
it comes in like maybe 3 or 4 times, but like you said, at completely random moments.
Yeah.
I was like, what? A lot of times it's like to narrate how the news or like how the events are being shown are affecting sort of like national media politics, I guess, like who is cutting what deals and who is carrying the show, and a lot of like, so it's almost like a historical sort of like very detached narrator, but like you said, it comes in randomly throughout the first and like third act, which is kind of strange for me.
Right. Yeah. It felt like it's like a note. They were like, people aren't going to follow this. We need you to like add this in. I don't know if that's the case, but
yeah.
So I think the interesting thing you get, like as this is going on, some of the other stuff we talked about with the negotiations with left-wing groups is happening. But as Howard's speeches go on, and I think this kind of heightens to the point that leads up to the big speech from the boss, is, there's this irony and contradiction where he's like, television is not the truth. What you're seeing is a lie. Like, turn off your television, stop watching this. And then this is when he like faints or has a seizure or whatever, and the crowd like goes wild, and you're like, people love this. And again, that's where I'm seeing this more specific satire and commentary on commodifying a message to the point where it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And it does. I think we've talked about this before too, because Andor just came back on Star Wars, and there's like shows like that. And I think now there's a lot of like there's a lot of like shows about rich people that are, satirical and critical, but I think there's a decent, enough set of kind of anti-capitalist, somewhat like shows and movies that are coming out now, but are, generally produced by major studios and networks, to the point where you're like, I like this, but like, is the fact that this exists like in this form, like Andor, a show being produced by Disney, like naturally.
Well, that's
yeah.
the whole next beat of the movie, right? Because it's like around here, he has a show, he does this big, like his next big speech is about how like Arab nations are buying all of our media, and you don't know who gets to decide what comes on the news. Basically lambasting the parent company for the news station, which is like UBS or something, in the movie. And that's the only time that they sort of react to his sort of anti-establishment sort of rhetoric, is when it directly, well, it's actually because it works. Like everyone starts telegramming the president, like telegramming the White House, like we don't want to put up with this shit. Stop the merger, like all that kind of thing. And as soon as it starts working, the executives get a call to be like, send him to New York right now. Like, right. I need to talk to him, which is crazy.
Right. That's right. So that's when you get to this point where it's actually threatening things. And it's funny because it's something like very specific, because there's this merger that they're doing that's actually with like a shell company. And because of the way like their debt is structured, they need this merger to go through, or else like they'll be screwed. I think, it's kind of like they took this gamble, it seems like. And yeah, he taps into this thing that's like specific enough that it threatens their bottom line, and they're like, well, we're fucked. And right, so they send him to New York, and again, this is where you get the speech. He closes the curtains. There's this long boardroom table, and the actor, it's Ned Beatty, and he's just like this barrel-chested, like bellowing, mustachioed man, and I mean, this rant where, oh my god, it's just so good. We talked about it a little bit before, but yeah, like you said, it's a rant, but it is given with the tonality, like this deep bass resonant voice of the guy. He has a big walrus mustache. It's very almost like Hellfire Preacher or like presidential speech kind of thing. Like the way he delivers it is so amazing. Yeah, it's just so good. And then it keeps cutting back to Howard, and he's like has this like religious sort of look on his face of like fervor, because the guy is like basically telling him about how the only thing that does anything in this world is money, and money is like there are no democracies, there are no communist dictatorships, nothing. All the systems that have governed our world have ended, and now the only thing that actually governs the world is monetary exchange. And he kind of like convinces Howard of this corporatist version of the world, and so then Howard goes back and starts giving those speeches, you know what I mean? Yeah, and it's right. He says you have meddled with the primal forces of nature.
I love that moment, because he doesn't say it like that. He does it like, you have meddled with primal forces, and it's like, what the fuck is happening?
But like so there's this whole buildup, right, and this idea that there are no nations, there are no democracy, even the Soviet Union. Like, what do you think they're talking about? Do you think they're discussing Karl Marx? No, they're talking about the return on the investment that the nation or the state is getting. And it all like builds up to this. It's this idea that this is the only system. There is no alternative that exists or will ever exist. But what he ends the speech with is this almost like utopian vision, where he's like, but actually, like, this is going to lead to a world, one vast ecumenical holding company where for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused. Yeah. And he's chosen, Howard Beale to evangelize this. But it was just like, fuck, man, like, we're still
when he says all boredom filled or whatever, I was like, oh fuck, like what a read of the future that you could not have predicted was coming, where like boredom is the key thing that must be stopped, you know what I mean, where all of our lives are around eliminating as much boredom from our lives as possible.
Right. And it's interesting because, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I think this is like this kind of vision of like hyper capitalist like thinking that was really taking off in this era and was being like exported to other countries around the world. We're like restructuring economies in South America and decimating the welfare state and any kind of like government institutions and replacing them with just like capital flows. That's all coming back to the West. And it's kind of what the same playbook that they're trying to run now, like in the US.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this idea that, flows of capital are in markets are this primal force of nature that can't be disturbed, but also they're the only way that we can organize because they're going to lead, like, just you wait, eventually, like, we're not there yet, but eventually it'll lead to this like utopian future where everyone actually like is really happy and prospers.
Yeah. I do think too, this is like, because we talked about this earlier, so I want to bring it back, where the point of view character kind of, this is a moment where that switches a little bit and we start spending a lot more time with the corporate sort of executives and what's her name? The person who is Diana, Faye Dunaway's character, Diana Christensen, who's the programmer of the network now. I feel like this is the moment that we start to see their point of view more, because like Max kind of fades away. Like we see Max sleeping in chairs, having like a couple of arguments, but his role is kind of over at this point, and it kind of switches to them and how they are going to handle it. Would you agree with that? Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like, it's too, because he's just fading, he does start preaching Jensen's message, which is this like anti-human, really anti-social, like there's no individual, and his ratings start to fall because people are like, they hate it because it's corporate. It's like literally the stuff everyone hates about working in a corporate office that he is preaching every night. But then they, like, my favorite part, like my favorite commentary, I guess, about that is that Jensen refuses to pull him, even though it makes more business sense to do so. And I think that is such because his whole pitch to Howard is, this is a primal force that cannot be stopped and you cannot get in the way of it. It is making money. And then when the ratings start tanking, he's like, no, he's preaching the right message now. So of course we're going to take the hit, which I was like, it all is smoke and mirrors, man. It all sucks. It's all just contradictory. And it's serving an attempt to serve this. And again, it's like, they can't, this Arthur Jensen, this capital, like he can't, this also just reminds me of like the just the like moron tech executives we're dealing with now. Like, you have everything in the world. You have money, you have power, you can, direct like whatever you want people to watch, but like you can't get over the fact that like some people like don't agree with you and that like upsets you deeply to the core. And like you're like, I have to also prove that I'm right. But I'm like, you don't have to you don't actually have to. You said there is no democracy. You don't have to convince these people of this, right? Like in your world here. And it's this like contradictory thing of him like, no, we're going to keep it on even though it's losing money for us. It really reminds me of like when like lately with all of the crazy like Republican policies that have been going out that are contrary to like sort of the Republican Party platform for the last 60 years. You know what I mean? Like you see these like weird things of like, oh, we're going to raise taxes in the form of tariffs and we're going to do these other things that are inherently like anti-individual liberties. And then you have all of the same people who once like would pillory the Democrats for any sort of suggestion that might impugn on any of these values. Now it's like completely okay. And it's like, this was again a completely telegraphed in network. It's just like, the veil in a lot of ways has been lifted and like there does. It's all, and it's like, I honestly think that's why I had a hard time calling this like a pure satire now, because like a genre film or a genre piece has to have certain tenets. And the thing is that satire, like good satire, is always on the edge of what is real and what is not, and being like silly about that and like commenting on like this could be the case. And like the fact that that's that is true is the funny thing. But now it's like, no, that's just the case. You know what I mean? Like that is just how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it does. It's like a lot of it, certain parts of it feel trivial in a sense because you're like, yeah, that's the way the world works now, but it's still highly relevant. Like you said, it doesn't work as much as satire because there's not that distance between the way the world is and like the world that this is trying to portray.
Yeah.
But
and it also is like so this is the next and sort of the last major scene of the movie, except for the ending, which I would say is also major. But like, is that boardroom scene where they're all in, not boardroom, but they're all in like the sort of conference room, and the executive is sort of like, Jensen will not budge. He will not let us take this person off the air, even though it's going to ruin not only his show slot, it's going to ruin the network because people are tuning out and they're not going to tune back in. And so they were all like, what do we do? And then people kind of, as a joke at first, are like, I guess we have to kill him. And they're all like, ha ha ha. And then they're like, so would we hire someone? And then they just discuss an assassination, and they're just like, yeah, I guess that is what we have to do. And that's like, again, it's such good political commentary that they are willing to assassinate and murder another human being, one that they have forced into the position he is in because of his mental illness. And then instead of defying a board member, they are going to kill him. Like, yeah. It is such a condemnation of our entire system, and it feels so true. You know what I mean?
Right. It's so matter of fact and treated as such a logical conclusion to reach that it's just dealt with in that way. And they're like, okay. And then they do it. And I think it does, not to get like too like conspiracy brained here, but I think there's also like an analog to this too of like with US politics, like, you know, the United States and various companies that operate in the United States, like, have committed assassinations, and at a certain point there's probably a meeting of people who are like, well, I guess we have to do this. And in a lot of those cases, I think these people are, you know, either directly at one point were assets of the United States government or like a company, or have ties to, you know, intelligence communities and stuff. And they're like, well, you know, there's this idea of like blowback where, you know, you look at like the United States arming the like Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets, and they end up becoming the Taliban, like this kind of thing where you're like, well, we've created this thing and like it's gotten out of hand, so there's only one thing we can do.
Yeah. It's such a condemnation, but it works so well. And then of course they figure out how to fold it into a larger business plan about how they're going to have the sort of leftist hour of the programming block report on the assassination directly after it happens. And they're going to film with the studio cameras because they're going to do it in the studio. They're going to have all that footage so that they can then use it in this other block. And it's like, wow, that's so dark. That's so sinister.
And then, it happens. The two gunmen stand up, shoot him. The narrators, you kind of pull back from the TV and you get the four kind of TVs that we saw at the beginning, like each different stations covering it and cutting to commercials. And then the narrators, like, this was the story of Howard Beale, the first known instance of a man who was killed because he had lousy ratings. And it's just like,
and it's
what done, a great roll credits.
Yeah, so good, man.
You're like,
it's wild. And I think we should just jump straight into Nightcrawler because it feels like kind of like the logical continuation of this movie for that era, and we can talk about it. But also, like, any like overarching thoughts about Network and why it works so well for you?
No, I think we've touched on a lot of it. I also think it looks really good as a movie. I mean, part of it's just the wardrobes are incredible just because I think they were, it's of its time. People had real teeth. I was like, damn, everyone in this movie has their real teeth.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of stained probably from smoking cigarettes, but it's kind of great.
Yeah.
But no,
also the fact that Max is a middle-aged man, he's like looks like he's 65 to 70.
That was some
that was some wishful thinking on his part.
Yeah. But
to be fair, though, there is like a weird age difference thing where like Hulk Hogan, like old pictures of him when he was 35, he looks very similar to how he looks now when he's like 60.
Yeah. And I'm curious how old Robert Duvall was in this. I assume he was older, but you look at like George Costanza is like 31 in Seinfeld, and because he's bald, you're like, looks super old. But he, Robert Duvall was like in his mid 40s. I guess that tracks. Frank.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think we've touched on it. Like it's an extremely both like timeless and prescient and relevant movie that I think like captures a certain like public sentiment, and like I think it is a little ideologically muddled, but I think that kind of works for it in a way that like, because too, like you said, like he makes Howard Beale, even though we kind of leave his perspective, I think he's still a sympathetic character, which I think is pretty important to the structure of this movie, and making it work, because we understand like, the state that he's in and that he is not well and is being exploited for this purpose. And I at least from my perspective, you understand he's tapping into something visceral in the population, but he's not really saying anything. Which I think is also important. But I don't know. Do you have overarching thoughts?
I just think that it's like, it is so prescient that it feels kind of crazy. You watch it and you're just like, this is how our attention economy works. It's just not the form. It's just not the medium in which that he thought that it would still be. You know what I mean? In a way, it's kind of like 1984, except maybe more successful, where it's like not these broad themes that are the same thing, but like basically individual characters, systems, ideologies, like all of them still exist today. It feels very timeless in that way. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it felt very much kind of like a circus to me, but in a way that made it feel kind of timeless, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's like upsetting too, because you're like, so much has changed. You're like, it's like the media environment is so different, but the motivating forces are still the same.
Yeah. Let's jump into Nightcrawler. What were your initial thoughts here?
So I had seen this movie some time ago. Probably relatively close to when it came out, so it could have been around 10 years. And okay, I think of this movie in a genre of movies that I'm going to call Reddit movies, where I think it's like around this era, there's a handful of movies that were like kind of cult hits that it seemed like they got big on Reddit. I think of this, Ex Machina, the Alex Garland movie with the AI, and like Whiplash, of these kind of like indie auteur kind of genre pictures.
What's so funny is that I kind of felt the same way, but I kind of thought of it as like the grind set films.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Because I think it's something's in there. I don't know what it is, but both of us have identified this thing.
I mean, I think part of it is this like kind of the protagonists in these movies are all these kind of younger, disaffected men who, I mean, they're different in each of these movies, but yeah, it does kind of have this I don't know, this kind of like search for meaning, but in a kind of like in a twisted way.
This one feels like it is much more about the gig economy, economic hardship, the classism that is inherent in our job market. Like if you are born poor, you probably will not be able, even if you're super smart, you go to Harvard, all that kind of stuff, because you don't have the social connections, you're probably not going to land one of those huge paying jobs. Even if you are the best in your field and you're super great, it's like, I feel like that classism felt very apparent in this film specifically, that maybe where so it wasn't as much in Network, but like Lou is a psycho.
Yeah. And no, I think you've touched on something there that I had the thought too of like, I was like, I don't know if this is as specifically relevant to news media. I think it's very relevant to the gig economy and the like be your own
entrepreneurial
the be your own boss kind of, where there's always someone underneath you, kind of MLM style like economy. But it's in a way that I remember this when I first watched the movie, and I think my sentiment was generally the same watching it this time, is like, I think this movie is deeply cynical in a way that upsets me, and I don't really like it because of that.
This movie is very cynical, but I think that it again is like, in a way, for me, Lou, the main character, because like you constantly see him quoting from like business books and like saying all the things that you think a boss would want to hear you say for an interview, and like the whole cultural like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like love what you do, all that kind of thing. Like even from the very first moment when we see him with the people in the scrapyard, he is just trying to get a job because he is in a recession and he is dirt poor and he is currently stealing to survive. And then even later when he's like become this kind of influential media person, has sort of like a business, and I'm kind of using scare quotes, but you see him sort of acting in a way that he thinks those people should act when you have that success.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's very strange. It's like it's psychotic, but in a way of like how CEOs are all psychotic. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, he's like exists purely on like LinkedIn platitudes. And it is right. This weird, right. And you have this juxtaposition of his actual, like seemingly what his actual like class status is, and this attempt to like assert himself in that way. But yeah.
Keep going. Yeah.
No, you mentioned too, and I think this can get us into the plot. He is a psycho, and he basically has no arc in the movie. The movie opens, and he's the person that he is. And
it's never said like firmly that he's sort of autistic or on the spectrum or something, but there is like one conversation he has with his employee later, which I think like we'll get to it, but like, dude, that gave me the chills when he has that thing where because they're talking to each other and his employee's like, your problem is that you don't understand people, like you don't know how to like talk to a person. And then later he goes, you know, you were wrong. It's not that I don't understand people, it's that I hate them. And I was like, oh, holy shit. Like, this guy is so scary.
Right. But it is like, it starts to get into the like savvy psychopath territory, like movie trope too, where you're like, this guy's but I guess not. I don't know.
I feel like it worked. It worked for me because it felt like commentary on like the CEO class. You know what I mean? Like those executive decision, like the people who cut the deals, and like how everyone thinks that they're supposed to be like the business. It's all about wielding power. It's about getting the best deal you can. And there's like a lot of those scenes throughout the movie, whether it's like him on the date or him bargaining with the price and all that, where he's always driving this hard bargain. And it's not really like he never buys a nicer house. He never like does anything, like he doesn't have any sort of material gain that this new money and success gives him other than his car. But like, I don't know. I feel like it's really trying to comment on how like business in the our current age requires you to kind of ditch your humanity because it's not profitable and it will prevent you from being profitable.
Yeah, and I do think I think the kind of neurodivergence coding of it, whether intentional or not, you mentioning that also feels relevant to this like CEO culture where you have people like Elon Musk and even like Mark Zuckerberg, where people are like, oh, well, he wasn't doing a Nazi salute. Like he's just neurodivergent. And you're like, oh, no, like he might be, but like he's also a very bad person. And you can be both of those things. But I think too, you get shades of like Lou in the movie having this kind of like childlike, he's very childlike and naive, but he doesn't really understand how the world works. And he's also like very amused by like television and cartoons. Yeah. And you don't get any backstory. So he does feel like this just kind of like vector of evil that was just like looking for an opportunity to like kind of like slither into and like rise up the ladder a little bit to where he has control over people in their lives.
Yeah, and the thing that I was like, I kind of was hopeful at the beginning that he would like break the cycle, because you see him get rejected by all these people, even though he's just trying to get information about how to be successful, essentially, which I think a lot of people can resonate with. And then you see him finally get to that place, and there's like a bunch of moments leading up to the third act where he's like his employee who is a homeless man, Richard, as he always calls him. Rich sort of makes mistakes or is like doing this thing, and instead of like getting like super mad and like just like being horrible to him, he's instead like, you know what, we're going to get it next time. And he has that kind of like relentless positivity business thing going on. And you're like, oh, so at least he's trying to change. But then by the end of the movie, you're like, no, he's way worse. Anyway, why don't we jump? You keep going and then we'll jump in.
I read some stuff, Wikipedia and production stuff, and the screenwriter and director Dan Gilroy like talked about that he wanted to write a movie where the bad guy wins. Like he was essentially like deliberately like I didn't want to write a character that really had an arc. I wanted him to be bad and then win at the end, and kind of cited some like Scorsese movies and other movies. I also think it's kind of the
bringing this back is a movie, my Scorsese point.
Yeah, but this is also a movie I have not seen, but I think I'd get the gist of, and I don't plan to watch. But like the Joker movie, I feel like also, which is directly inspired by Scorsese movies, like has that. I mean, I think that one seems like it's more trying to explain how somebody gets there, but it just has this cynicism and kind of like nihilism that just like, I don't know, upsets me in a way that doesn't feel productive.
Yeah.
But let's jump into the plot.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of take this at a clip because I don't actually think that the plot matters as much as the characterization. So why don't we we'll move quickly through it, and whenever you want to stop, just interrupt me and we'll stop down to talk about them.
Yeah, for sure.
So we kind of open up and we meet our main character, Lou, who is at sort of a train yard and is clipping the fencing off of like a chain link fence, and it is revealed that he is stealing like manhole covers, copper wire, this fencing, and he is then caught by like this security agency, and he's sort of doing this thing of like, why would you need my license, and like kind of doing all this stuff, and then he just assaults the guy seemingly without a care and steals his watch because it's a nice watch. And then we see him sort of be driving away with this watch, going to the scrapyard that I mentioned earlier, where he then sells all of this stuff. And this is the first time we kind of get him doing his business thing, where we see him negotiate price with the scrapyard guy. And the guy's like, yeah, I can give you like $250 for it. And he's like, whoa, like you're killing me here. Like this is the market price and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, this is all stolen. And the police are coming here and asking me about this right now, so I'm only going to give you this much amount of money, so take it or leave it. Again, just like ripping all the power away from Lou, who then who then is like, oh, okay, in order to continue having a good relationship, building a business relationship with you, I'll take that price. So we already like, I think it's great characterization that we see him, that everything he says is sort of out of one of those self-help business books. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And he like acquiesces. He's like trying to operate in this way that is so incongruent with like the markets that he's trying to operate within, and these
like
people
they're
are
very
like
blue
unsettled by
collar,
it.
and he's trying to like be very white collar with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and even later, like he steals a really nice bike to pawn and pay for his camera or the police scanner, I think.
Yeah,
But
both
even
of them.
that, yeah, you're like, okay, you have this like super nice custom bike, like. I don't know. Maybe this is just like thinking too much into it, but there is just like you would sell, like you could sell this somewhere else other than a pawn shop and actually like get more money for it. Like,
well, I think this is part of it though, is that he has no fucking idea what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like he pretends like he becomes very successful, but it's just like this like sheer confidence and kind of this like, you just have to do it. That's what all these books said. You just have to go and do it. And then like, if you act successful, then you'll be successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he goes to the pawn shop to sell this thing. And there's like a part in it where he's riding the bike around. He's like, I won the Tour de Mexico with this. And like, it has 37 gears and it's like it's only 6 pounds. And the bike shop guy is like, no, there's no such thing as a bike with 36 gears. Like he just like states it flat out, like, and throughout the movie there's these things of characters, usually lower class coded characters, giving him like real truth, like objective real world truth, and him just blowing by it and like feeling as though it's almost like a frustration to have to listen to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like you said, so he is driving home from the sale and he sees a car accident. There's like a car on fire. Police people are dragging a body out of the car. And Lou witnesses these sort of like ambulance chasing photojournalists who come out with cameras and are like taking footage. And he sort of asks them what it's about. And they're like, yeah, we sell to whatever station pays us the most. And so that's what we're going to do. Like, check on your morning news. It's going to lead. If it bleeds, it leads. And he gets inspired to like, that's what I want to do. And so, like you said, he steals this bike, goes to a pawn shop and pawns it for a very basic camcorder and a police scanner that he then spends like a week figuring out what all the codes are, how to use his camcorder. Like, we see some footage of him like practicing with it. And then he starts chasing down events that come up on the camcorder, and like he keeps either being late or his camera isn't good enough, or like everyone's kind of laughing at him because he's just trying, like, getting started, and he then finally catches like a good like car crash, or it was I think it's a car crash, and he gets a really good oh no, it's not a car crash. It's the guy who is in the convenience store where it was robbed and he gets shot in his car.
Yeah.
And so he runs over and starts filming this guy who is dying. And he is literally standing over the paramedics, putting a camera like as close as possible, to the point where they're like, get the fuck out of here. Like, what are you doing? This is a active crime scene. This man is dying. And it later is told to us, the audience, that he did die. And he like doesn't care. He goes in and does it, and then he brings this to the CBS equivalent, I guess, like one of the local stations that is paying another guy that was on the scene that he went to. He overhears him selling his footage to them, and so he goes in person to sell this footage.
And yeah, I think a thing that, as we talk about what this means about like the media landscape and what it's saying there, we mentioned it a little bit, but I think the thing I brush up against like pretty quickly is like, this is a movie that came out in 2014. The characters in this movie have smartphones.
Yeah.
This is not, I would say not a world, or maybe just barely a world, where like freelance video journalism is even relevant anymore because everything's
it's like on the it feels like this movie was made just as that era was ending.
because you're like everything is recorded on a cell phone. Even to at one point he's like, you should get this camera, it's got like 2.5 megapixels, it's like 18 times zoom. And like every phone is like has like 5 times the quality now. And you just this idea that, I mean, generally like the stuff they're doing is happening in the middle of the night because it's going to lead on the morning news. But like now, anytime there's anything like that, this happens, everyone takes their phone out and is recording stuff. There's going to be, I think, just between social media and like the decline of local news and, these incidents, I think a lot of like, I think the thing that I immediately thought of was like, okay, it's like extremely dark, but I was like, which police shootings that were caught on camera, like when did those happen in relation to when this movie came out? Because to me that feels like a kind of delineation point culturally of like when the cell phone video became kind of like mass news media that like can have this effect. And I think it's like right around this time. I mean, like I think Eric Garner, the man who was killed in New York, where he was choked by a police officer and is saying "I can't breathe" on video, like happened in 2014. Like, Michael Brown was before that. It wasn't on camera, but it's like, so I don't know. I think it was just like, I understand the sentiment there, but it's like the kind of the point. I think that some of the poignancy and relevance of that specific aspect of the movie gets lost a little bit because of that. But
I think you're right. It's just like, for me, it does feel like it is more allegorical, but still relevant now, where like you can sort of transpose this movie onto sort of like the TikTok influencer sort of game at this point. Like that's what it has evolved into, is sort of like making a personal brand. And like a lot of journalists now are personal brands that then stations sort of buy. And like with the creation of Substack and a lot of these other mediums, it does still feel relevant, but like not this. You know what I mean? Like not in the way that they depict it.
Right. And I think the like local news media side of it too, it's like, I mean, I don't know this landscape. I can't say I'm an expert in this landscape. It feels more like the threat isn't this like kind of power hungry local producer. It's more like corporate consolidation where kind of these directives, which, again, allegorical, the producer kind of represents this directive of like, we need to be showing violence happening against wealthy white people, preferably by poorer minorities, because that's what people want to see, even if the crime rates are going down. And I'm like, I think in real life, that's, more of a larger, like concerted effort coming from like things like Sinclair Broadcasting Group, who buy up all these local news stations and then like program the same stuff on them.
Yeah. And it's all like politically motivated a little bit. But like they even kind of have that moment in this movie as well, where later on towards the end, one of the producers of the show comes in and talks to that woman, Nina, I think her name is. And he's like, I just got breaking news. Like, it wasn't a home invasion. It was a drug invasion, because there's like they found a bunch of cocaine in the walls of this house. Like it's not the story we thought it was. We got to run this story right now that there's an update. And she's like, no, that would get in the way of the story. And he's like, what are you talking about? This is the story. And she's like, no, the story is that this happened and that these people died and that it's scary and it's a home invasion and it's a crime in the suburbs. And it's like so bleak. Oh man. But that's a great way to get back into the plot, because he does bring this footage to her, and that's how we are introduced to Nina. So like you said, they have this conversation where she actually buys it off him for like a decent price, $250. And she's like, man, you need better equipment, like get a better camera, get better mics. And also like, this is what we're looking for. And she's the first person who actually takes him under her wing. You know what I mean? Like she is someone who invites him into this sort of like confidence of like a mentor relationship. And he like sort of thrives. Like he starts to really like he always talks in such a weird way that you can tell she's kind of uncomfortable with, about how he's like, yeah, like I'm always trying to make a better product and I'm here to, like, he talks like not like a human, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Again, it's just like an endless stream of like of LinkedIn platitudes.
Yeah.
I think too, she feels like almost so like potentially like a pretty direct analog to Diana from.
Yeah, I thought that
Network.
too. If they feel like the same character, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's actually the Renee Russo who plays Nina is the director's wife. Which I thought was really funny.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean she's great, and
she is very good.
That's the thing. This movie, I'm like, it's really like it's slickly made. I think like it's got a pretty interesting soundtrack. I think all the performances are like very, very good and impressive. I think just the like content of it, just kind of upsets me.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird thing because like I thought it was going to be more like horror coded or something, like sort of serial killery, but this movie is coded as a romp. Like if you go through it, like you said, the music is super interesting. It feels sort of like an amusement park ride, and I kind of feel like that's intentional because, like you're saying, the content is so cynical and bleak that it's like kind of he's doing like the filmmakers are doing what Lou is doing, which is tricking you into enjoying this horrible thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Like one of the crashes where he really gets good footage. I think it's the one where he moves the body after the car crash.
that made my heart hurt.
Yeah.
Oh.
But like the music playing there is this kind of weird, like world music inspired, almost like post-rock, like guitar, where it like feels like slightly triumphant. Where you're
it feels like World Fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like inspirational, and it's kind of like he's doing it, and you're like, what is happening?
And I think that is intentional because like, and again, I think that this is that Scorsese thing of, I think people may have misinterpreted some of this because I think that the music, the movie is purely from his perspective. You know what I mean? To the point where some of the interactions that he has, it kind of feels like we're hearing his version of how that conversation went, specifically with Nina, because he has like the most sort of sway with her. But like, yeah, it's very strange. And even like the movie is supporting him, even though, like you said, he is the villain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is hard. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's I think like a challenge of fiction is like, can I write from the point of view of someone who's deplorable? And then like, as an audience, you're like, do I enjoy, do I like watching this?
Yeah.
And is the movie, I mean, I think this movie is very clear and aware of this character's like morality in a way that maybe some like Scorsese type movies or other movies. A movie that I think of is Under the Silver Lake. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No, I haven't.
With Andrew Garfield, it's kind of like a LA conspiracy thing where he's kind of like a dopey slacker that like stumbles into this thing. But that's a movie where I'm like, I like some of the stuff the movie's doing, but it's like at the end of the day, like when your main character and like the person whose point of view we're following is like a misogynist and sucks, like at what point are you like, I'm good? And this movie, like, I think this movie is kind of like a noir type in a sense of like, one, in setting, it all takes place at night and around LA, and this idea that we're following this one character in his point of view. It
does kind of feel like Drive, but for news.
Yes. Okay. One of the like Letterboxd reviews of that I read of this movie from a critic that I like, David Ehrlich, was exactly that. It was basically,
the soundtrack, the feel of the movie, it almost is sort of noir-ish because it is very like crime oriented. Like it does feel very like similar. It kind of feels like Jake Gyllenhaal saw Ryan Gosling get this really cool movie out and he's like, I want one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he keeps doing it. He starts sort of building a stable of work that he has done, to the point where he is now hiring. So he hires this local kind of homeless man named Rich, who goes to, it's the most awkward interview scene ever, where he sits down and he's like, so what's the job? And he's like, well, first, why don't you sell yourself to me? And it's like this weird power play the whole way through. And he's paying, like, because he can't afford to pay him anything. So he's like an intern and he's giving him like $30 a night. And it's just heartbreaking because he keeps saying throughout the movie, Rich, he keeps saying like, hey man, like I live in a garage right now. Like, can you give me anything else? And he just like, oh, it's brutal, man. It's really hard to watch how he treats Rich. But it's sort of like the class warfare thing of like this guy who is on the outside trying to get into the inner circle and willing to just step over and on top of anyone who will prevent him from getting there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is the part of the movie, that just upsets me the most. And it's like, I think Riz Ahmed, the actor, is a great actor and gives a great performance. But I'm just like, I am like, does this character need to be this like kind of pathetic to make the point that the movie's trying to make? Like, to the end, to his tragic end, which is kind of like the pinnacle of Lou's like depravity, but you're just like, God, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just I mean, let's get there because I think that's what we're driving towards. But so he like keeps buying better equipment. He buys a better car. We see him in the way he drives, to where it is like basically an analogy to like him as a person, where he is willing to do anything and risk everything for any modicum of success. It's like the Brendan Lee Mulligan quote where he's like, I will do anything to win anything, which is very much the tagline of this movie. But so he keeps kind of amassing this work, and him and Nina become to be like a little bit like closer and closer as he keeps bringing her stories that will lead, which is also solidifying her network and her position within the network, essentially. But then we get this, oh man, it was almost impossible for me to watch, but the scenes where he asks Nina out and then they have their date, and he is essentially throughout the whole thing, like using his little bit of business leverage to try to suppress and like dominate her to the point where he like demands sexual favors in return for continuing to supply her with footage. And she's sort of like, no. And he like berates her and kind of keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. And then like later in another meeting they have where he beat the cops to the crime scene and runs around sort of like filming it all, like going onto a crime scene before the cops had a chance to get there. Like he even reveals later that somebody was alive and then died while he was there, and he didn't call for help because he was looking for footage. Like he brings that footage to her and he's like, you will pay me whatever I ask you from now on. I will always come here first, but you will never say no to me again, like last Thursday or whatever when they had their date. And I was like, holy shit, this is the darkest, most bleak shit. This like weird sexual violence, power play. It's like it was horrific, but I don't know. Do you have anything to say about it? It was to me just so hard to watch.
Yeah, I think, just that it's like it's just upsetting. And it's like, okay, I guess this is important for this characterization of this guy, that he's, as he gains power and kind of his, because, it's also like a masculine character, this kind of like grind set guy that, you're describing. There is like, there's generally like a masculinity that he's not necessarily always portraying in this character. He's kind of like soft spoken and like generally pleasant, and so I feel like that it's like a way to represent that in this like kind of like amid all this desire for climbing the ladder and like financial success, there is this like also, like you said, like sexual I don't know, aggression, I guess, or just like
it's so weird because it doesn't feel sexual in any way. It's just about power. You know what I mean? It's like that Janelle Monáe song, like power is sex, sex is power kind of thing. Like it's all about power with him. And I don't even think that he doesn't ever make any sort of show of desiring sex, really. It's just this one instance of him demanding it because he can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and it's just it's bleak and gross, and I hate it. So we continue on. Then we find like, because of this triple homicide home invasion, which is the footage he brings her that I was just mentioning. Like, he gets there, he sees the criminals leave the scene of the crime. He hears the gunshots. He's filming it all. He brings it to Nina, has this sort of talk of like, you will introduce me to every important person in this radio station. You will get whatever I bring you, and you will pay me whatever I ask for, because I am only going to ask a good price, and I have thought about it. So don't question me, kind of thing. And it's like, wow, this guy is so scary. But she seems like scared of him, but also like a little bit sort of like seduced. The biggest problem I have with this movie is the ending relationship between him and Nina, because instead of it purely being sort of this like weird power struggle between them, it does feel this weird like pseudo-sexual, like she enjoys being dominated. And I was like, this is bullshit. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's just me. It was hard for me.
I know. I think there's like it feels like there's like a misogyny there of like, that works for her too. It just feels gross.
It's definitely a whole thing.
Especially because there's no indication of mutual attraction really before he starts trying to like sexually blackmail her, essentially. So it does just feel, I don't know. Just gross.
It's I think the part of the movie I liked the least, but it also I understand why it's in there. It's part of the characterization. It's like this whole thing, but it's just a little bleak. And then the next sort of section of the movie is him essentially withholding evidence from the police so that he could get the next part of the story before anyone else. So he like chases down the license plate of one of the criminals that he got but didn't give to the detectives who came to ask for the footage. He was able to go and find out where they live. He and Rich start following them in a car, and the idea is like, wait till they're in a public location that's in a more affluent area so that the news would care about it more. And they go to like this restaurant, and Rich even has this thing of being like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, we said a better neighborhood, not a active restaurant where when they get arrested people might be killed because they're armed. You know what I mean? There's just like this lack of care that he has for any other person in the vicinity. In fact, he's kind of hoping that something bad does happen because it makes his footage more valuable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think this is where I'm like, it gets into like, is there some I don't know, guilt or self-reflection from the filmmaker of like, this is what you do as a filmmaker, this wears I feel some of the
tragedy or something
kind of, there's a manipulation here, and you're turning up, at this point he's trying to direct the scene to play out like he wants it to for the most emotional impact from this like cynical point of view. I don't know if that's what he's going for, but I think just him being behind a camera this whole time as this kind of like quote unquote passive observer, when in reality he's like conducting a lot of this. I don't know. It's like there's something there. I don't think it's the main thrust of the movie, and I don't know how self-reflective it is on the filmmaker's part, but I very much don't think that the movie is like, this guy's a hero, but I also do think that like it is I feel like it has less of the problem I have with Scorsese movies, because like I was like, this person is hideous. Like, I don't think that anybody would ever think that he is a hero, but maybe that's the case. I don't know. And I don't necessarily think that. I think maybe more the just trying to a reflection on the industry and trying to say like, just call some question into that. But again, there is also the television film dichotomy where it's like, this is television is bad.
It's dirty. It's all about money. And
it's about this. There's this constant need for it, I think, as opposed to film, which is more of a I don't know. There's not, you don't have to show a movie every morning at 6 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
And yeah, so then they go on this crazy chase after a gunfight starts between the police and the criminals that are in the restaurant. Like a lot of people sort of die, like a couple of, I think it's like 5 police officers and some of the people in the restaurant go to the hospital and or die. They go on this high speed chase that he's like breaking traffic laws to keep up with the police, and which I also would be like, the police would never let that happen.
Yeah.
But we allow it because it's a movie. And he then gets to the point where he sees this crazy movie-like crash, and he gets it all on film and gets out and looks around, looks into the car that crashed with the criminals in it, and is like, Rich, like, get out here. He's dead. Can you get footage from inside this car? Rich comes out because he has recently negotiated with Lou to make sure that he gets 50% of the profits from what is happening tonight because of how illegal and horrible it is. And he's like, at least give me something so I can make myself feel a little bit better about what I'm doing. And so he comes out, and then the criminal is not dead. And in fact, he was like, he keeps calling out to Rich almost as though he's trying to wake someone up. And then Rich comes over, has the camera, and then gets shot like 5 times in the chest and falls down. And then the criminal gets out and just like makes eye contact with Lou and Lou is just filming him, but not chasing him. And the guy just starts walking away because he doesn't think Lou's going to come after him. But the police arrive and there's a shootout and he dies. The basic ending, I'll just rush to the end and we can really talk about all of that part. But like the end is that he brings this footage to Nina, who is like, this is amazing, and has this like weird pseudo-sexual moment with him, and he's like beloved in the studio. Everyone's like, oh, hey Lou, like we got something good for us now, and like he's like really putting on the like kind of office charm. And then the police like demand that they take the footage, and the network is like, no way. This is our First Amendment right. Like, this is provided to us by a contractor. We did nothing wrong in securing it. If you want to talk to the contractor, go talk to Lou right there. And so then they have this thing where like Lou gives a very obviously previously prepared story to the detective, and she's like, I know you fucking did it. And he's like, okay, like you don't. It's very much in the way of like, you don't have anything on me. Like I'm good.
Yeah.
And so then it kind of ends with him getting these accolades and having a lot of like credit given to him, making a lot of money. And he uses that to then have a team of interns, which he then sets out upon the world to do the work that he's been doing. And he ends the movie with sort of I will never ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And it's very ominous as we see the 2 vans go off. There's some stuff we missed in there, like how he kills the competition by sabotaging their van, and then he films them dying and going into the hospital after the accident and stuff like that. But that's like the gist of the sort of plot here. And I gotta say, like, yeah, the end felt really gross, felt really bad. The stuff with Rich also felt really gross. But I really loved when Rich was like, why did you do this? And he's like, you negotiated with me. Like, you blackmailed me, which is what he has been doing the entire movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
It kind of, it's like all of this bullshit that he has been saying the whole time, it is a lie. He only wants success and he will do anything to get it. You know what I mean? It's not about anything else.
As soon as it's turned around on him, he's like, yeah, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, because there's that whole part where he asked for the job at the scrapyard and the guy's like, I'm not going to hire a thief. Like, why would I do that? And he has this like reaction. And at the beginning, you're like, man, nobody will give him a shot. It's a recession. Like, how is he supposed to make money? But then when he is put in the same position, he acts not only badly, he acts worse. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, and who knows? I don't know how I feel about that, because I ultimately do feel like right now our sort of world has entered back into sort of a aristocratic sort of model where you are either part of the upper class or you are not. And your opportunities that are afforded to you are based on that. And like, there is the commentary of that in here. But there's also that like class betrayal of him sort of leaving everyone behind. But I don't know. I feel like it's just like paired with how icky the whole movie feels. Like Network. I don't know if you agree with this, but Network is easier to take the political points out of because it's funny and kind of outlandish and silly and people act kind of crazy. This one, I feel like I got less of the meaning because I was just like, it was so grotesque like this is like a person that is completely hollow and has been filled with all of the worst parts of our corporate selves,
Yeah, and you're like, okay, it's mapping a lot of that onto this one person, but it's harder to. I mean, I think a lot of it's pretty heavy-handed in Nightcrawler with some of the stuff that like Nina says about what she's looking for, but then it does by making this one person so morally bankrupt, it kind of blunts the edge a little bit because you're like, well, he's obviously a bad guy.
Yeah.
And I do think Network, you kind of get the more like anonymous corporate power. Like we get the speech from the Ned Beatty character where we literally have seen him one other time in the thing. And then, he's the guy that's his job is he takes you into the boardroom and he browbeats you until you submit, where it does. And it's kind of framed around more, maybe relatable or sympathetic characters. And in this, it's like Rick or
Rich.
Rich is the, I guess, kind of supposed to be that sympathetic character, but he's almost made to be so pathetic that it's just like,
I feel for me, what it felt like is that they were trying to be like, look, not all people of the same like means as Lou at the beginning end up so morally bankrupt. Like it is a choice that you can make to whether you maintain your humanity or not. But like you said, it is also like and maybe they were doing this on purpose of like, you have no power if you do that. And so you become a victim. And I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think that there is some agency in all of us, and like saying that, like, I just don't want this to be misconstrued to be like, oh, this was Lou's only option because like otherwise he would end up like Rich. You know what I mean? I don't agree with that message if that was the message, but
right. Yeah. You're like, well, Lou's terrible, but look how pathetic Rich is.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think between these two, which one actually hits you more? Because I do feel like these are both generational movies about our media ecosystem. Like you said, Nightcrawler, I feel like was at the end of the part of that it was relevant in. So like there is that to take into account, but like, what did you like? What didn't you like about these movies? And which one do you think does their job better?
Well, okay. Can I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. Can I just ask where like, are you on Jake Gyllenhaal in general?
Here's the thing. And maybe she's going to be upset with me that I reveal this, but Alice has a huge Jake Gyllenhaal crush and Maggie Gyllenhaal crush. However,
interesting.
I think that because of all the weird stuff that's come out about him, that feeling has been like tapered off a little bit. For me, I never really thought that his acting was anything super special for me. Like I know he's kind of a pretty boy, but if I'm going to go for a pretty boy, I'm going to go for like a Ryan Gosling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, I'm not a huge Jake Gyllenhaal fan, but I do like, I am, especially because of the rumors around him. I just kind of stayed out of his orbit.
Okay. I don't know if I'm aware of the rumors, and we don't have to get into details.
It's just like him. It's like the classic stupid man stuff of like, being very interested in underage or almost underage women, and maybe some grooming stuff and just gross. Yeah.
So I like Maggie Gyllenhaal a lot, and I find her to be like a pretty like naturalistic, like human actor. I think the thing with Jake Gyllenhaal is, I'm like, I don't know if I ever read him as like relatable, like kind of everyman type, where like I find him, I'm like, he's very handsome, but I think the performances that I think he's good at is when he is kind of this, like, I mean, and like this is a good performance, but
it's a great performance. Yeah,
this feels like there is something there in him of this kind of guy. But I think too, like Zodiac is a similar of like an obsessive, but more, he's less malicious in that, but he is and I do like his performance in that a lot. But again, it's not like super relatable, like everyman type performance. I've not seen Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a pretty like seminal performance of his. But
I would agree with all of that you just said. I think that he has good work. I forgot that he was in Zodiac. I really liked him in Zodiac, and I do think he does a villain really well. Like, it's a pet theory of mine that all actors can do one thing really, really well. Like Bruce Willis can sit in a fucking chair and just listen to someone talk to them, and it feels so engaging and interesting. Like Harrison Ford can take a punch like no other actor in the entire world. Like, everyone has their thing, and I feel like Jake Gyllenhaal can do the sort of like slightly wacky kind of like oddball that is like chasing down something to do with like business or like success, I guess. Like somebody who's like trying to integrate into the world that they want to be a part of, but are always sort of odd in some way that keeps them from fully being part of that world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but anyway, sorry to go on a tangent. I think that's, I don't know.
No, I think it's a really good point. Like, I don't know. Like, is he in The Lobster?
No, it's Colin Farrell.
Oh, that's Colin Farrell. Yeah, I think Colin Farrell is a better Jake Gyllenhaal. So that's just
I like Colin Farrell a lot. I think we've kind of gotten at my general feelings on both, which is that Network just felt like this like prophetic, really like pointed, just like well crafted piece of film. It really connected with me. I found all the performances really good and compelling, and like we said, a lot of those speeches really hit hard for me, and just like pretty like pitch perfect relevance still 50 years later is pretty incredible.
It feels very much like The Great Dictator, or what's the other one, as Doctor Strangelove, where it was filmed in a way that is just unreal enough that it feels timeless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I really love that about it.
Yeah, I think so too. It really worked for me. Nightcrawler, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was gonna say that with Nightcrawler, I feel like it was during that era of like gritty realism in video games and movies that actually kind of like limited their appeal when it comes to like how they age. Where this one is like so specific to a moment in time, and so specific to like a trend, I guess, which was like gig work in the media, that it works for me in like the capitalist commentary, but it doesn't work for me 100% as like a long lasting indictment of like how we get our news, because it feels so time locked, if that makes sense.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to like take away like artistic intent or anything. But it does feel like, it almost like stumbled into this commentary on the gig economy more than media.
Let me say, I think, Patrick, you just nailed it 100%. Like, I think that it was like trying to do something about media, and it ended up doing something about the gig economy and capitalism. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe the media stuff was just a background for it, but it does feel like so specific about, because it could be ambulance chasers, like lawyers, you know what I mean? Like, it could be anything, and they picked this specific industry. So like, there's a reason why they did that, but I just think that it works better because it's like, almost you could write this movie about like an Uber driver that is trying to become like a professional driver for the rich or something, kind of like a Parasite or whatever. I don't know. I think I agree with you what you said. That's all I'm trying to say is that I think that's exactly my take about that as well.
Yeah, but I mean, this really worked out. I think the picks we had, like, putting these two movies together, yeah, there was a lot there. And so in watching them back to back too, I think it's funny that we both did that, because I do think it was really hits you on the head.
Yeah, I needed a little bit of a break after watching them back to back, because I was like, man, that was so bleak.
Yeah, same.
I was like, dude, I have to just like play some video games or like watch a funny show, because this is really hard to just think about for that long. However, I would say that both of these movies, before I give my favorite of the two, I think that both of these movies are really fun watches. Like, if you're not looking for like a deep commentary or whatever, but you want to throw something on that's like they're fun rides, both of these feel very fun to me. I think that my favorite of the two was Network. I think it feels more timeless. It feels better constructed, but it also feels very like, it's just like fun to watch, like all those monologues, like you said, how people talk and behave is crazy. And it's very funny. It's like made to have a lot of really good laughs. Nightcrawler is much more like, it feels almost like a House of Mirrors, or like a haunted house at a carnival, where it's like that very unsettling set next to the bright lights and carnival rides kind of thing. So I think that I liked Network of the two a little bit better.
Yeah, I think we're like really on the same page. I think with both of these movies. I feel like I wasn't sure coming in. I was like, I wonder where Nick's gonna land on these, and I feel like we came into it like pretty much at the same place, which is cool. So I also agree. Network. I mean, I think Nightcrawler like functions pretty well like as a thriller too. Like the scenes at the end with the chase and stuff. Like, you know, it's exciting, suspenseful, like filmmaking. So it does work as like entertainment in that way too. But it's Network for me too. Yeah,
I think that it's hard, especially if we were like saying like which one has the better commentary on our news media, because I feel like Network is at a time where things were more centralized, so it's easier to make sweeping kind of commentary about that by setting it in that time. However, I do think that, like you said, Nightcrawler feels very fun. It feels almost like blockbustery in a way, where you could like, it feels very much like a summer night movie or like a drive-in movie that I would enjoy. So I think that we're basically at the very same place. I think everyone should watch both of these movies. But I will say, I think that if I was to use my rating system, I think I'll give a Network like a 4 or a 4.5, and I would give Nightcrawler a 3.5. Yeah, I feel like that feels good. The right numbers. What about you? Would you just say like nice. 5 stars?
5 stars for both. No, I saved my Letterboxd review because I didn't want to give anything away if you were checking it, but I did write it down. I think I initially came away with Network like 5-star movie. I think the like boardroom speech, I was just like,
it's amazing.
And then I think kind of talking through it and like thinking more and reading about it, I was like maybe like 4.5. I think there is some stuff there that I'm like, doesn't hit as well. I think Nightcrawler for me, I'm thinking like 2.5, which is kind of low for me. And again, I think it's a well-made movie. I think it's just really the upsetting parts just like it just dips into like too cynical for me, and it's just like it just like wilts it enough that I'm less inclined to, I don't know. I don't think it's one that I'll like want to like rewatch again. But
I think that you're right. I think the thing for me about Network is that I would have placed it probably at like a 4.5, but like the context around the Zionism and stuff made certain parts that for me hit really well because it was sort of like a commentary on kind of the bigotry of these sweeping generalizations and like the pointing the finger at different marginalized groups for people to be mad at in sort of hopeless times by the media. Like that's how that felt to me. And I was like, wow, I really enjoy this commentary. It feels very relevant still. But the fact that the screenwriter was like, no, I'm just a Zionist and I hate Arabs. It's like, oh, okay, well, that feels less good.
And we're not, this was off a reading of Wikipedia, so we're not saying the Patty Chayefsky estate. We're not saying that. But there was thing or two with Faye Dunaway's character. I think the director, Sidney Lumet, wanted to cast Vanessa Redgrave, who is like considered like one of the greatest actors of her generation, but she was very vocally left-wing and specifically like supported the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Is that what PLO stands for?
Yeah.
And so Patty Chayefsky was like, absolutely not. She can't be. I think maybe Jane Fonda too. They considered and was just like, no, too political, like too left wing. So you're kind of like, oh well, but still.
Yeah,
good movie.
But both great movies. I think people should check these movies out. The Nightcrawler stuff, I'm surprised you put it at 2.5. But I understand why you did. I'm surprised because like I just thought that like, you know, it's a good enough movie, and even if it's not like you're trying to take any sort of like thematic sort of like political thought out of it. It's just kind of a fun visual movie. It's like very like it's, you know, LA at night. It's very interesting. It's like has like kind of spooky. It felt very much like a 90s thriller to me, like one that is like a solid 3 stars. You watch it once and never think about it again.
Yeah, I think it was just like the feeling more than the craft. Just
yes,
like, put it there for me. So
yeah, cool. So we will be back soon with another episode of Culture Boys, where we talk about what we're going to do next. Do you have any sort of general thoughts about where to take it?
I'm kind of a blank slate right now. I think I need to consult our list that we've brought up before.
May I pitch one?
Please do.
I was thinking, since it's May, it's my birthday month when we're recording this, but coming out in June, it will be the start of the summer. So why not do Wet Hot American Summer and pair it with something in that sort of realm? You know what I mean?
I love it because I've never seen Wet Hot American Summer.
Oh my God, Patrick! This is one of my favorite movies.
I feel like everything I know about it and the people that are in it and that made it, I'm like, this has to be right up my alley. And you know, it's a blind spot.
We could pair it with Grease 2, which I watched recently and found way more enjoyable than I thought. However, I won't subject you to that if you don't want to. We could try to find another camp-based one, and we could just do like summer camp revisited kind of thing. But whatever you think. But I'm going to put out Wet Hot American Summer as one that I would like to consider.
I love it. I think that is a great suggestion, and I'll I think there are a lot of potential summer camp movies to pick from. I'll start considering
we could do Sleepaway Camp. That's a crazy movie.
I don't know that.
Oh, you haven't? Oh man, it's like one of the worst movies ever made, but it's like it's very funny to watch if you like to watch bad movies, kind of thing. All right. But if all of you are interested in following us on Letterboxd to see what we're up to, it's the only thing Patrick uses for social media these days, then in the show notes you have our links to both of our letterboxes. So go see what we review, what we're watching, what we liked recently. And if you want to get in touch with us, please do so by going to the email that's also in the show notes. I think it's like movievsmoviepodcast at gmail.com. Send it to us if you have a pairing, and we'll definitely consider it. We'll put it on our list, and maybe you'll hear your interesting pairs on the podcast soon. Patrick, anything else you want to talk about before we end?
No, I think, we'll have our Culture Boys episode. I feel like I do have stuff that I want to talk about on Culture Boys, but
me too.
I'm going to save it.
Yeah, I just did a comedy show where I had to be a character that was related to AI somehow, and I'll definitely want to talk to you about that.
Yes, I can't wait to hear about it.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.